Hello, my name is Joshua Kirkpatrick, and today I'll be presenting on Roth IRAs. One of the questions that faces you as a young adult is, how do I start investing? How do I start investing in my future? Now, there's a couple different ways that you can go about it. For example, you can use a savings account or a 401k plan. However, one of the best and most utilized plan out in the professional world today is the Roth IRA. One of the things that you'll see whenever looking at the number of Americans that are investing, you'll see that over time it started to rise. However, it started to drop. The quote that you'll see on the screen says, "The Dow just hit 20,000, but half of America missed out." Essentially, what that means is the stock index, the Dow, rose to such a point where all of the stocks that was within the stock index were quite clearly growing at a rapid rate, and the people who had invested in those stocks through the form of Roth IRAs or other such retirement plans were benefiting from it. However, because less people are investing, they haven't had the ability to really cash in on that growth. So in order to cash in on that growth, you need to start investing, and you need to maintain your money in the account moving on into the future. One of the things that people often have issues with whenever it comes to retirement planning is not putting enough money in. They don't know when to add the money, they don't know in what amounts, how often to. However, you can see that whenever you look at the graph on the screen, you'll notice the different plans have different amounts whenever it comes to after a point in time. Now, at the very top, you'll see a 401k, whereas more towards the bottom, you'll see a defined benefit pension only and both plan types. Now, the 401k, it will help you moving on into the future if continuously contributed towards. However, if you don't start it early enough, and whenever you look at the left portion of the screen that says median retirement savings, it's clear that people aren't adding enough money into their retirement savings. So without having retirement savings whatsoever, you won't have the ability to stop working and retire and enjoy your later years. However, if you have a retirement plan, that's not the end-all be-all. You need to continue to contribute towards it, and you need to continue to make sure that you're investing in smart options rather than just doing nothing and sitting on your money. One conclusion: teaching this subject, or financial literacy, is more important today than at any other point in history. One of the reasons why it's the most important point in history is because Americans are struggling to figure out how to manage their money. Because of increased amounts of technology out in today's world, as well as many other bills that need to be paid, whereas 50 years ago they didn't exist, it becomes ever more apparent that Americans need to be smart with their money and organize it in a way that they know moving on into the future what they need to pay, how much they need to pay, and when they need to pay. And because of that, you'll notice on the screen there's a breakdown of costs for the average American household. Now, with all of these costs, the average American might think, well, how much money do I have to really spend after I contribute to my retirement account? And unfortunately, most Americans get that wrong. You need to pay yourself forward first. And by understanding how to manage your money and understanding where your money is going, you'll be able to do such a thing. And because of that, you'll be able to be more financially stable moving on into the future. as it says at the top, but even for those that get it, it isn't going to be easy. Just because you invest in a retirement plan does not mean that you're going to be safe entirely, or it's going to return a consistent profit year after year. Whenever you invest in a retirement plan, like say a Roth IRA, you invest into the market and you invest into stocks and equities, things of that nature. But you have to be sure to manage it correctly, and you have to make sure to watch for signs that it may be in trouble. Because if you stay invested and you don't manage your money correctly and you don't watch it, then potentially you could miss out on a lot of money. So whenever you're taking into account the graph on the screen, you'll notice that there's two different lines. By staying invested and managing your retirement plan correctly, you'll notice that at the end of the time you've been saving, you'll have a much higher number. So in order to get to that point, you have to do, as I said, manage your retirement plan correctly and continue to add into the plan and not take any money out. Now, you may be thinking, what is a Roth IRA? What do I need to know? Well, a Roth IRA, and this is completely different from a traditional IRA, is an individual retirement plan that you contribute to through after-tax income. So whenever you make your paycheck and the taxes are taken out, that money can then be put towards the account. Whereas a traditional IRA, the money that is contributed to the plan is completely tax-free. However, once you retire, whenever taking out money of a Roth IRA, that money will be tax-free since you had previously been taxed on it. Whereas with the traditional IRA, since you contributed tax-free money, it will be taxed. And the important thing to note is that whenever you're contributing to your retirement plan at a younger age, you're most likely going to be taxed less. Whereas in the case of a traditional IRA, whenever you take out money during your retirement years, you're going to see that it's going to be taxed more, and it's going to eat up more of your plan than had you picked a Roth IRA. Now, there's no required minimum distribution, and you can pass on your assets to your heirs upon your unfortunate death. And one of the things that you may be thinking about whenever it comes to a Roth or a traditional IRA is, can I take this money out? Well, with a Roth IRA, at any time you can withdraw these contributions without being taxed or penalized for it. And anyone who has taxable income can contribute to a Roth IRA, but certain requirements need to be met. For example, you need to have eligible income to contribute. Now, let's think about investing, and let's take a look at an example. The example on the screen. Look at the variables, like, for example, your annual contribution, your number of years until your retirement, the expected rate of return, taxes, and so forth. And you'll notice that at the end of all of the retirement planning put together, the Roth 401k has a higher number, and that is due in part to, as I mentioned before, the tax difference. If you start putting in money into a Roth 401k whenever you're young, you're going to be taxed less than later on in your life, like you would for a traditional 401k. Now, let's talk about Roth IRA. There's 9 compelling reasons why you should take on a Roth IRA. Now, as I mentioned many times before, it is tax-free whenever you take out your money. there's only the potential for your income to be taxed more whenever you're contributing and not after you retire and you start withdrawing. And should you pass away, your money will be transferred to your heirs completely tax-free. And additionally, as I mentioned before, no minimum required distributions are needed. Now, there's no age limit for you to contribute to as long as you're working, and there's no real impact from the new Medicare surtax. So taxes are a big focus whenever thinking about your options. And because of that, a Roth IRA is a great choice. On the rest of the screen, you'll be able to see the rest of the benefits. However, the key thing that you need to really focus on, although everything else is just as important, is down in the bottom right-hand corner. If you are young, your income is likely to rise. And that's true. You're not going to be making the same amount of money at 23 as 55. So whenever you contribute money into your retirement plan, you want to be putting the most in there possible. You don't want to have it being taken away in the form of taxes. So that's why it's crucial to understand what you're doing, what kind of plan you're working with, and when to invest, starting early, most likely. We're going to go back and look at some variations of those reasons, but in list form to help you understand just how crucial these things are to the Roth IRA and why they should compel you to invest in a Roth IRA. The money will grow tax-free inside of the Roth IRA plan. The withdrawals, as I mentioned before, are also tax-free. There's no minimum distributions. Your heirs will get your money tax-free should you pass away. There's tax flexibility throughout the entirety of your retirement. You can help reduce or even avoid the Medicare surtax by taking this route. Hedging against future tax hikes. Use your contributions at any time. As I said before, tax-free and penalty-free withdrawals should you take it out early. If you're older, you can continue to contribute as long as you work. If you're young, your income is likely to rise. I would like to put special focus on the last 2 points. If you're older, you can continue to contribute as long as you work. You can always contribute into your Roth IRA, although you cannot if you aren't making any income. So essentially, it's self-explanatory. However, it is important to know that you can always continue to fund your retirement. And if you're young, your income is likely to rise. That's important because, as I mentioned before, Roth IRAs are contributed towards through after-tax income. So by putting in money whenever you're young, you're going to be taxed less and therefore save more. Let's look at a hypothetical situation. Let's say you have a 9% annual rate of return. Now let's take 3 scenarios. You start at 25 and invest $2,500 a year. You start at 35, saving the same amount of money. And let's say you start at 40, but you save $5,000 a year. You may be thinking, $5,000 is quite clearly double $2,500. Wouldn't that mean that there would be more money in the starting at 40 line? No. And that's because of compounding interest. Whenever you save money and you put it away into your Roth IRA or other such retirement account, by getting a 9% return on it, and you get your interest, then that later on is returned upon. So if you have, say, $10,000 and you have 9%, then that would be $900 that's put into your plan. So from there, you would have $10,900 taking another 9%, and so on and so forth. So by starting early, even though you may be contributing less than if you were to start later on, you're far better off. And you'll see that your money can grow exponentially, whereas if you were to wait 10 to maybe 15 years, you wouldn't see that impact. Now let's take an example. Let's look at this example and think about how we can move on into the future and save our money correctly. So if you were to take a Roth IRA and you were to contribute $1,000 initially, but nothing more than that, gain 9% on it, and retire at 70, you'll notice that after 52 years, you only have a little over $88,000. And 52 years is a long time to only get $88,000 back from. So you may ask yourself, why is this the case? What is happening that is causing my money to only grow slowly? Well, it's because of the additional contributions. There are none. And because of that, the only thing that can be returned back into the Roth IRA is the 9%. And because of that, and especially starting with only $1,000, it's going to be an extremely minuscule amount. So you can see that there's an importance of continuing to save, although you already started. Now let's look at this example. Let's take the same variables, except let's contribute $10 per month every single month for 52 years. You'll notice that at the end, after 52 years, rather than having $88,000, you have a little over $210,000. And although it's only $10 a month you're contributing, you have to remember that's $120 a year, you get 9% back on that, and then it continues to grow and grow. And as you move forward into the future, years later down the road, that 9% annual rate of return is going to yield a far greater return than earlier on in your life. Let's look at this last example. Note, for all of these examples, we have been keeping the variable same, however changing the annual contributions. And in this case, $83 per month or $1,000 per year, you'll see that when compared to the last two, the number that you'll get at the end of your retirement savings, so when you're about to retire, is going to be far higher than either of the last two examples. And that's completely due to the fact that you're increasing your monthly amount or yearly amount of contributions to your plan, denoting that there is an extreme importance on contributing as much money as financially possible and financially safe to do so towards your retirement so that you are gaining the most out of your time. There's a lot of things moving on into the future that you may not know. For example, where are you going to be working at in 25 years? How much money will I be making every year? How much student loan debt will I be taking on whenever I finish college? These are all great questions, and you may not have the answer for them pretty soon or even relatively soon. However, it's important to note that as you're moving along your life, say for example it's a timeline, there's going to be different things that pop up that are going to present to you an opportunity cost. Or you're going to have two opportunities. By taking the one, you can't do the other, therefore missing out on it. Such a concept is extremely important whenever thinking about retirement planning. So, say for example, you start on the top of the timeline, moving forward. This person is smart with their money, they're making monthly payments on their student loans, they're paying as much as possible so that they get their student loan debt paid down as quickly as possible. And then later on in life, since they manage their money, debt, and savings correctly, they have career and lifestyle flexibility. However, let's say you don't do that. Let's say that you wait. You don't pay on your student loans, you buy expensive things, you borrow more money than you truly need. Well, you'll see that towards the end, you're going to be moving further down and down. You're going to be living paycheck to paycheck. You're not going to have any security. You're not going to have any real retirement savings. So, although these are two examples that may be extreme, you can definitely put that into your life. You can notice that, well, if I don't pay, then I'll be paying more in the future. I'll be incurring penalties, extra costs, and the money that you owe will just grow. It's going to grow and grow to a point where you can't control it. So, by being proactive and taking steps like making extra student loan payments, you can ensure that this won't happen to you. Even if you just pay the regular amount of student loan payments every single month, it won't happen to you. However, it's going to take you far longer to pay off your student loan debt than had you made extra payments on it. Let's look at another example of an opportunity cost. Let's say that you're buying a truck for $15,000, making monthly payments on it. If there's a 0% interest rate, then you're going to be paying $15,000 regardless if you pay the entirety of the amount up front or if you make monthly payments. However, in most cases, you're going to have an interest rate. And notice that as the interest rate moves up, your monthly payment moves up. And as you move further and further away from the initial $250 monthly payment, then you're going to be paying more and more. But it's not going to go towards the truck. Rather, it's going to be going towards interest. So whenever you look at a car or any other big ticket item that you want to purchase, you have to think to yourself, can I afford this? What's the interest rate on it? How will the monthly payments be? Because these are all questions that could either provide you with a plan to pay no more than what it costs, or it could cause you to pay well over, like in the exact last situation, the 10% interest rate, you're going to be paying well over the total payment that you need to make for this. Now, there's two conclusions that you should take away from this entire presentation. One, age is an opportunity, powerful enough to transform the lives of a generation. And this is true, because if you invest in yourself at an early age, then you'll come to find later on in life, you'll be far better off and you'll make your life a lot more comfortable. And number two, the cardinal rule. Let your savings dictate your spending, not the opposite. Whenever you get your paycheck, you shouldn't think, well, how much can I spend before I have to save? You should be thinking, how much can I save while comfortably paying my bills before I spend? Because ultimately, you'll never get the money that you spend back. But by saving first and putting more money into savings than you are spending, you're going to be setting yourself up so that in the future, whenever you do retire, you can take out the contributions that you made earlier on and enjoy that money. So you're essentially storing it for later, but making sure that your ability to retire is safe. This concludes today's presentation on Roth IRAs. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach the CFA Society Pittsburgh at cfasociety.org/Pittsburgh. Thank you and have a wonderful day.